Hello everyone, I'm Senior Airman Second, currently deployed here at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar with the 379th Expeditionary Maintenance Squadron. So I've been doing class while deployed here. Just a couple of heads up before we start. I just need to cover one thing in terms of my obligation to the Air Force and also with a Department of Defense initiative, and that's going to be DoD 1344 1.0, and that just governs what members of the military service are allowed to say in regards to political statements, political policy, and stuff like that. And the fact that since we are in uniform, we are not allowed to endorse or give our personal opinion. So I just need to express that this video is for academic purposes only. One thing I would like to cover is that since we are here at Al Udeid, that aircraft do take off and land, and if it is audible on the recording that there is an aircraft flying, I will pause, I will stop, and then once it has flown over or landed, I will continue with the presentation. Right. So today, I'll be covering the Safe Staffing for Nurse and Patient Safety Act of 2018. The purpose of this bill was to address understaffing issues, which have caused nurse burnout, patient satisfaction decline, and also negative patient outcomes. Bill was introduced February 15th, 2018 by Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, who is a Democrat, and it was introduced from the Finance Committee. Next slide, please. So S-2446 is structured in 3 sections. Section 1 denotes the name by which the bill will be addressed, and now the name of the bill will be running across each one of the slides throughout the presentation. Section 2 discloses the congressional findings that the bill found. That will be addressed here in the upcoming slides. Section 3 declares a legislative remedy to the issues found in Section 2. Next slide, please. All right, Section 2, as I said before, is going to cover the key congressional findings and what were some of those findings. The findings found that improper staffing costs $26 billion annually in readmissions for Medicare. So patients that had not received the medical care they needed went home, came back, and now hospitals are not able to have reimbursement through Medicare. And as you see, that costs $26 billion per year. Turnover from burnout, so the nurses who were working in understaffed departments were working so hard, and they decided to up and leave. And when that happens, to retrain new people coming in costs each institution approximately $5 million per year. And also, in those type of environments, the other finding was that obviously patients and nurses suffered negative outcomes, and there have been academic studies to support that when departments are staffed to appropriate levels, that patients and nurses have positive outcomes. Next slide, please. So Section 3 offers remedies to the issues found in Section 2. What are the key elements of Section 3? The first one's going to be the required creation of a nursing committee by each participating hospital. The follow-up part to that subsection is going to be the duties of that nursing committee that's going to be created, and the following section of that is going to cover the penalties for non-compliance to the more regulatory parts of the bill. Next slide, please. The nursing committee, as mentioned on the previous slide, that needs to be created by each institution, is going to have a certain composition to it. 55% of that nursing committee is going to have to be nurses who have no administrative and or managerial association. So that would be nurses who are actually working on the floor will comprise at minimum 55% of this committee. Also, there will be some other caveats to this composition of this committee as well, such as specialty nurses, managers, and other staff hospitals, so that there is an inclusion or consensus in terms of the staffing levels throughout the whole entire institution or department. All right. And as I mentioned before, duties of the committee, as I already said, It's going to be addressing the staffing levels, but in addition to that, it's going to have to do some secretarial responsibilities, some record keeping, some data collection and data analysis to make sure that what is happening with the implementation of new staffing numbers is correlating to what's being found and documented in the care setting. Next slide, please. The scope and effect of 2446 should be pretty vast and wide-reaching. Anytime this happens with healthcare, as we've seen in the past with the Affordable Care Act in 2010, it always has national implications. So in that term, it's a little more numerical assessment of that effect. So the bill is set to address hospitals that participate in Medicare, and currently there are 4,474 hospitals that participate in Medicare. So you can see that is a pretty decently sized number there. Also, I said it's going to affect the nurses, and according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics accounts that there are approximately 29 million registered nurses as of 2017. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the slide, there will be a national implication more towards economical ones, as it's pretty readily known that healthcare comprises about approximately 1/5 of the United States GDP, and the more precise number is 17.9%. Next slide, please. Constituents and policy benefits. So obviously with any passing of legislation, there are people who are going to have more benefits from it being passed, more rewards from it. And in this instance, pretty sure everyone agrees that it's pretty straightforward. It's going to be that the nurses and the patients are going to be the ones who benefit the most. So nurses will have adequate staffing, and patients will receive the care they need from those adequately staffed departments. Next slide, please. However, with any piece of legislation, there's usually opposition, some manifestation. This one's probably going to face two styles. That's going to be legal and economic. The first one being legal, and it has to deal with the nature of American government, federalism, and how the powers are distributed between the state governments and the federal government. And traditionally, police powers, which are powers that are policing, healthcare, general welfare of citizens in each of those states, have been delegated to the states. So healthcare, as this bill addresses healthcare, this would necessarily probably be an issue addressed by the states. However, as we see in federalism and also in recent events with the Affordable Care Act and the Commerce Clause, when things cross state lines, now the influence of the federal government can become more prominent, and it would be an interesting legal evaluation of how far the federal government could go in dictating the actual nurse to patient ratio, especially in this bill, as it already notes that if there is an existing nurse to patient ratio by the state, that the federal government may not preempt it. However, I do have a court case here listed as South Dakota versus Dole, 1987, and I mentioned this because it is relevant, and this has to do with federal funding. And the reason why I mentioned federal funding, because Medicare is federally funded, and also too, South Dakota v. Dole addressed highway funds. And the way this all comes together is that South Dakota v. Dole, the situation was the state of South Dakota did not want to raise its drinking age to 21. They wanted to keep it at 18. The federal government said, fine, you can have that way, but we're withholding highway funds. And those highway funds were withheld to the point that South Dakota was adversely affected in some way, and South Dakota took it to the Supreme Court saying, hey, the federal government can't do that. They're interfering with our state rights. And the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government could do that. It could indirectly influence and have cooperation from the states by withholding federal funds. So I went through that whole entire process explaining South Dakota v. Dole, because even though the states may have the right to set the ratio, the federal government could hypothetically withhold Medicare funds to persuade the states to have a certain number that the federal government was looking for. Okay. So that being said, we're going to move on to the economic obstacle. This one's going to be an obstacle which you probably found within the hospital institutions of their own. Specifically, anytime that you mention staffing increases or anything of that nature, there's going to be pushback from the hospital administration because more people cost more money, and administrators are often budget conscious, and they're going to feel that having an increase in staffing it may not be an economical an economical feasibility in terms of meeting the requirements of any policies like this. And with that consideration and all that said, that would be the conclusion of the slides here. Thank you.